Some hauntings are whispers, a faint knock, a flicker in the corner of your eye, the sort of thing you can dismiss as imagination. But every so often, a case emerges that is so violent, so deeply unsettling, that even the skeptics are forced to stop and listen. One such case came to light in Swansea, when a family was driven out of their home by forces they could neither fight nor understand. Furniture was hurled across rooms, bottles smashed against walls. The baby's cot itself was violently overturned. And perhaps most chilling of all, the police witnessed some of it with their own eyes. This is not folklore passed down through generations. This is not a story polished for Hollywood. This was a news headline, a statement given in tears by a mother who swore it couldn't be human. Before we begin, if you enjoy these journeys into the darker corners of Welsh history, please consider subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications. It helps us bring you more of these stories that often slip through the cracks of history. And who knows, perhaps by hearing them, you'll be more prepared if the shadows ever come knocking at your own door. So join us now as we tell the story of the Swansea Poltergeist, a case that remains one of the most frightening and well-documented hauntings ever reported in Wales. Before we dive headlong into arguably Swansea's infamous haunting, it's worth pausing to ask a simple but vital question. What exactly is a poltergeist? We've spoken of them before on this channel, but if you're new here, let's pull back the curtain for a moment. The word itself comes from German, Polten meaning to knock or to make noise, and Geist meaning spirit or ghost, a noisy ghost. But anyone who's encountered one will tell you the word barely scratches the surface. Poltergeists are not your typical apparitions. They don't simply appear in mirrors or glide down corridors. They act, they throw, they smash, they make their presence violently known. They don't haunt quietly, they demand attention. Now, regular viewers may remember when we looked at another famous case, the story of Pete the Poltergeist. Pete was mischievous, playful, even cheeky in the chaos he created. Objects would move, machinery would power up by itself, lights flickering. Harrowing, yes, but there was a strange sense of mischief about him. If you haven't seen that video, we will link it at the end so you can see the contrast for yourself. But the Swansea case was different. Where Pete's energy was disruptive and unsettling, the force at work here was hostile, angry. It wasn't content with noise or tricks, it sought destruction. A cooker ripped from its fittings, bottles flying at dangerous speed, the very home itself turned against the people who lived there. To truly understand the terror this family experienced, we need to picture Swansea in the 1960s. This wasn't a Hollywood soundstage, nor an isolated old manor creaking in the night. This was an ordinary house on an ordinary street. A place meant to feel safe, stable and private. And that's what makes this story so chilling. The supernatural invading the everyday. Just imagine you're there, a terrace street, the faint sound of coal deliveries and children laughing outside. Families living side by side, doors unlocked, neighbours trusted, and behind one of those doors, a storm was brewing. When we think of hauntings, our minds often conjure up images of vast crumbling castles, stone walls echoing with centuries of history, drafty corridors, flickering torchlight, the perfect stage for a restless spirit. And yes, Wales has plenty of those stories. Phantoms wandering battlements, knights roaming ruins, ghosts tied forever to the bloody history of our castles and mansions. But here is the truly frightening thing. Some of the most violent hauntings don't happen in those grand ancient settings. They happen in ordinary houses, terraced homes, council estates, places where people cook dinner, put their children to bed and watch television. In other words, they happen in houses just like yours. And that's what makes the Swansea Poltergeist so unsettling. It wasn't confined to the haunted ruins of history. It erupted in a small, everyday family home. 4 walls meant to keep danger out instead became a prison for something unseen. And that thought, that a poltergeist doesn't care whether you live in a castle or a council terrace, is what keeps this story alive in people's nightmares. The disturbances began quietly enough. Strange noises in the night, a knock, a bang, the sort of thing you could dismiss as the house settling. But soon the knocks grew louder, harder, impossible to ignore. Bottles didn't just rattle, they were flung across rooms. Furniture didn't just creak, it was thrown over. And in the middle of it all, a young family, just like any other, watched as their safe haven turned into a battlefield. And that is where the terror truly lies. If this could happen in Swansea, in a house like thousands of others across Wales, what's to say it couldn't happen anywhere? Poltergeists don't need Gothic arches or candlelit crypts. They can emerge in the humdrum of everyday life. Your living room, your kitchen, even your child's bedroom. The Howells family had only lived in the house for just about a year before they fled in terror. In a lot of poltergeist cases, the family seems to live with the disturbances for a number of years as they gradually get louder, more frequent and more dangerous. But in Swansea, it didn't take that long. In several TV interviews, the mother, 20-year-old Marcia Howells, described the most terrifying occurrences that had forced the family to flee their new home. It was an ordinary day. Marcia was at home with her 1-year-old son and her mother. Her husband was at work and her 4-year-old daughter was at school. Going about her business throughout the house, cleaning, sorting the clothes out, the usual housework that needs to be done during the day. As the day wore on, her mother suggested to take a break and have a nice cup of tea. Marcia filled the kettle and waited for it to boil. The noises had been quiet today. Maybe, she thought, the house was just settling down and getting used to a new young family. How wrong she was. The kettle boiled and the tea made. Marcia took the cup to her mother in the front room, when all of a sudden there came a tremendous bang coming from the kitchen. Marcia rushed to the kitchen to see what was happening. As soon as she opened the door, a bottle threw itself towards her. Acting quickly, she closed the door to protect herself. As she opened the door again, she saw another bottle lifting up, about to hurtle towards her. She didn't give it time to. She slammed the door and quickly got hold of her son and told her mother they needed to get out of the house. As they sat on the front step, waiting for Marcia's husband to return home, they heard loud banging and crashing coming from the house. When her husband returned, he went inside carefully to find the whole house in a complete state of chaos. Furniture had been thrown on its side, and everything in the kitchen was on the floor. As he went upstairs, he found the bedrooms had been affected as well. The beds had been turned upside down, and even more unnerving was his son's cot had been turned over and pushed up against the wall. This is the heart of the Swansea haunting. The normal turned upside down. The everyday transformed into a waking nightmare. And for the family inside those four walls, the escalation had only just begun. What started as subtle disturbances soon escalated into something truly terrifying. Objects moved with no one touching them. Bottles smashed through the air as if thrown by invisible hands. Chairs toppled, drawers ripped open. Every night the family waited for the next attack. But it didn't just happen at night. It could strike at any moment. The most chilling moments were the ones that defied human explanation entirely. One night the kitchen cooker, a heavy, cumbersome appliance, was pulled from its fittings and overturned. Imagine the force required. Imagine the terror of a mother watching her home transformed into a battlefield, her children frightened and helpless. There was nothing they could do, nothing that made sense. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't a prank, it couldn't have been human. As the chaos continued, the family faced moments that would haunt them forever. Doors slammed and locked on their own, and one bedroom, a sanctuary meant to offer sleep and safety, became a prison. Locked from the inside, but no one was there. Objects scattered across the floor, signs of a violent struggle that had no visible perpetrator. The police arrived after Marcia had called them, as she was so distressed. They had a look around and had to physically break into the bedroom as it was blocked from the inside. They discovered no one around, but the furniture all over the room, having been pushed by some unseen force to block the door. Even law enforcement, trained to deal with disturbances and threats, were stunned. They entered the home expecting a human intruder, and found chaos that can only be described as supernatural. Officers were confronted with objects thrown, furniture moved. The scale of the force was undeniable and terrifying. For Marcia Howells, it became impossible to deny the truth. She told reporters it couldn't be human, and she was right. No one could explain what was happening. The Swansea Poltergeist had made its presence known in the most violent, uncompromising way possible. This was not a mischievous spirit. This was a force that took over a home and left the family with no choice but to flee. And here lies the final terror. It didn't end when they left. A house abandoned is still a house, and the unanswered questions linger. What or who had claimed their home? And more importantly, could it happen anywhere? By now you might be asking yourself, well, why here? Why this family? Why this ordinary house? Poltergeist activity is rare, but when it does appear, it often seems to select its victims with frightening precision. The Swansea case is no exception. Paranormal investigators and psychologists have long tried to understand why poltergeists strike where they do. One popular theory is that poltergeists are connected to human emotion. Extreme stress, trauma, or repressed anger within a household may create an energy that somehow manifests externally. In some reports, disturbances appear around adolescents undergoing intense emotional or psychological change. Could it be that these invisible forces are drawn to emotional turbulence, feeding on fear and anxiety? Another school of thought proposes that poltergeists are not independent entities at all, but rather psychokinetic manifestations. In other words, the mind itself might unconsciously project physical forces into the world during periods of intense emotional stress. Some scientists call this recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, and while it remains controversial, the theory suggests that negative thoughts and emotions could somehow catalyse these terrifying events? Whatever the case, one thing is undeniable. The family at the centre of the Swansea haunting was targeted, and the intensity of the force, throwing heavy furniture, overturning appliances, locking doors from the inside, suggests a level of focus and purpose that goes far beyond mere coincidence. This was a presence reacting to, and perhaps even feeding on, the fear and despair within those walls. Poltergeists, in essence, seem to thrive on the ordinary. They choose lives that feel normal, safe, predictable, because the disruption is more terrifying when it strikes where we least expect it. And this brings us back to an unsettling truth. Perhaps it isn't just the location that matters. Perhaps it's the people, their energy, their thoughts that invite, or at least allow, these forces to emerge. And when we compare this to other well-documented poltergeist cases, a pattern begins to emerge. Emotional tension, household stress, and sudden unexplained phenomena seem to go hand in hand. In our previous video, Pete the Poltergeist, we saw similar but far less violent behaviour linked to the energy of the household. Pete's mischief paled in comparison to Swansea, but it reinforced one chilling truth. The mind and emotions of those living in a house may be more entwined with these forces than we care to admit. As we watch these stories unfold, we are left to wonder, could these forces be drawn to any one of us? Could our own fears, anger, or despair summon a presence that refuses to remain invisible? And perhaps that's the scariest part of all, is that there is no proof, no formula, no warning, just the haunting reality that these things can happen anywhere to anyone. The Swansea Poltergeist is not just a terrifying local tale. It is a part of a pattern that puzzles both scientists and skeptics alike. Poltergeist activity in its most extreme form seems to target ordinary people in ordinary homes. But what causes it? And why does it strike some families and not others? Skeptics, of course, will tell you there are perfectly reasonable explanations. They might say the family imagined the events in moments of stress, or that creaking floorboards, shifting pipes, and ordinary household accidents somehow combined to form the illusion of a haunting. Some will even argue the mother exaggerated the chaos just for attention. But let's be honest, when a cooker is ripped from its fittings and heavy furniture moves across a room as if lifted by some invisible hand, imagining it seems far less convincing than facing the possibility that something truly supernatural is at work. Others offer the theory of trickery, mischievous teenagers, pranksters, or even hidden mechanical devices. Yet these explanations fall apart under scrutiny. The intensity and precision of the activity would require not just planning, but superhuman strength, perfect timing, and most importantly, the audacity to terrorise a family without ever being caught. It stretches credulity far further than considering the simple, terrifying truth: a force beyond our understanding was present. Some scientists suggest psychokinesis. While this theory sounds impressive on paper, the reality in Swansea was brutal, targeted and aggressive. The furniture didn't just wobble or tilt, it flew, smashed and struck with force. If the mind could achieve that, we'd have all been moving our beds with sheer willpower long ago. So, where does that leave us? The possibility that the house itself became a stage for a malevolent presence, that the ordinary world, the walls, the furniture, the very air of the home, was invaded by something not human. It is far simpler, far scarier, and far more convincing than the elaborate mental gymnastics required to dismiss the events as anything mundane. And it is precisely that tension between what we want to believe and what we cannot explain that keeps this story alive. Skeptics will always offer a rational explanation, but sometimes the rational explanation requires more faith than the idea of a poltergeist with a very real appetite for terror. It's easy to read about overturned furniture and smashed bottles and think, I'd survive. But imagine living it every single night. Imagine lying in bed, hearing footsteps when no one walks, feeling the walls close in, knowing that the ordinary safety of your home has been stolen. For the Swansea family, this was reality. Sleep became impossible. Fear became constant. The house, the place where a family should feel protected, had become an unpredictable enemy. Pop culture often explores this fear, and perhaps that is why we instinctively understand it. Films like The Conjuring show families tormented by invisible forces. But in Swansea, there were no special effects, no director orchestrating scares. The chaos was real. And unlike movies, there was no pause, no cut, and no guarantee of survival. Every night could bring destruction. Television has taught us that spirits and poltergeists prefer grand, old-world homes. But Swansea shows us the truth. The terror doesn't care about architecture. A modest kitchen, a single family bedroom, a baby's cot, all are sufficient. Horror doesn't need Gothic arches. It only needs vulnerability. And this is where the human cost becomes clear. The family lived in a perpetual state of hyper-awareness. Every creak, every gust of wind, every shadow sparked panic. Meals, sleep, and even conversation were punctuated by the fear of the next attack. Psychologists studying poltergeist phenomena note this pattern. Victims often experience anxiety, insomnia, and a profound sense of isolation. In some cases, the family is permanently scarred by the experience, the home forever associated with terror. Even in modern culture, we see echoes of this terror. Reality shows like Paranormal Witness dramatize hauntings, and the emotional weight is compounded by the ordinary setting. We are drawn to horror in the comfort of fiction because we know it's contained. Swansea reminds us that sometimes the horror steps off the screen and into a home just like yours, with no script, no safety, and no guarantee that tomorrow will be normal. In our previous video on Pete the Poltergeist, we saw a mischievous, chaotic force wreak havoc. But here, the fear is unrelenting, raw, profoundly human. Swansea was not about tricks. It was about survival. And that is why, when we tell these stories, we emphasize the human element. The terror isn't just in the smashed objects or the impossible movements. It's in the minds, hearts, and daily lives of those who endured it. As our journey through the Swansea Poltergeist comes to a close, we are left with questions that may never have answers. What force invaded that home? Was it a spirit, an entity drawn to fear and emotion, or something else entirely? Something that exists just beyond the veil of human understanding? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, could it happen anywhere, to anyone? Poltergeists like the one in Swansea force us to confront a reality we rarely consider, that our homes, our most personal spaces, may not be as safe as we believe. That emotional energy, fear, grief, or unresolved tension could, in some inexplicable way, draw forces we cannot see, and certainly cannot control. Science struggles to explain it. Rational thought scoffs at the evidence, and yet the story persists, haunting not only the people who lived it, but all of us who heard it. Some suggest the poltergeists are a projection of the subconscious, an externalization of fear and trauma. Others argue that the spirit world is far more active than we imagine, that these violent, unseen forces are drawn to moments of vulnerability, and a few dare to suggest something even stranger, that the universe itself sometimes manifests its energy in ways we cannot yet perceive, leaving us to grapple with chaos that has no logic, no reason, no explanation, only experience. There is a lesson here, a moral, if you like, that extends beyond the terror. It is a reminder to pay attention to the spaces we inhabit, to the emotions we cultivate, and to the respect we give the unseen. Perhaps it's not just fear that invites the extraordinary, but also curiosity, mindfulness, and the care we take with our own energy. Or perhaps it is a simple warning that the world is larger, stranger, and darker than we often allow ourselves to imagine. For those who have followed our journey, the Swansea Poltergeist is more than a story of destruction. It is a mirror, a reflection of the fragility of human life, the vulnerability of ordinary spaces, and the thin veil that separates the known from the unknown. And for those who enjoyed our previous videos, like Pete the Poltergeist, Swansea offers a stark contrast, the difference between playful chaos and relentless, unrelenting terror. As always, we encourage you to explore these stories with curiosity and caution, to question, to investigate, and to remember some things defy explanation, and perhaps they are meant to, because in the end, the most chilling lessons are not the noises, the smashed objects, or the locked doors, but the knowledge that somewhere, beyond our understanding, forces exist that will not be reasoned away, and that the ordinary world can suddenly become extraordinary and terrifying. Thank you so much for watching today and for sharing this journey into the shadows with us. If you have enjoyed unravelling this strange tale with us today, please check out some of our other videos. Your support truly means the world to us. It keeps us exploring and uncovering stories that might otherwise remain in the dark. And if you have enjoyed this dive into the Swansea Poltergeist, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification. And as always, we want to hear from you. Please comment below with your own thoughts, your stories, experiences, questions. Your voice keeps the conversation alive, and we absolutely love hearing your stories, so keep sending them to us. If you would like to support the channel further, you can send us a super thanks. Just a small way to help us keep delving into the depths of Welsh folklore and history. But above all, you being here now is what matters the most. Watching, listening, and sharing in the intrigue with us. And remember, when you turn off the light tonight, don't be too sure that you're actually alone. Until next time, be careful out there.